Emma was the kind of person who found peace in quiet places. She didn't enjoy crowded gyms or noisy streets. Every morning before the world fully woke up, she would lace up her running shoes, tie her blonde hair in a ponytail, and step outside. She lived at the edge of a small town where the forest met the houses, and her favorite jogging path went straight through those woods. The forest was thick with tall trees that filtered the sunlight in soft golden beams, and it had always felt like a calm, safe place to her. Birds chirped, squirrels darted around, and the leaves rustled softly in the wind. One foggy morning in October, the kind where the cold air made her breath visible and the ground felt damp underfoot, Emma left her house at 6 a.m. sharp. She noticed that the usual forest sounds were missing. No birds, no wind, no leaves shaking. Just silence. Thick silence. She brushed it off, thinking maybe the animals were just sleeping in. She slipped her earbuds in and started her run. As she jogged deeper into the woods, the fog seemed to grow thicker. Even with her music playing, she felt something strange in the air. The kind of feeling that makes your skin crawl even when you don't know why. Half a mile in, she started to sense that something was watching her. At first, she ignored it. The forest had deer and wild dogs sometimes. Maybe it was just an animal, nearby. But the feeling got stronger with every step, almost like invisible eyes were following her, studying her. She took out one earbud and glanced behind her. No one. Just trees and mist. She shook her head and kept running, telling herself she was overthinking it. But then she saw them. Footprints. Large, barefoot prints in the wet mud, heading in the same direction she was going. They were fresh, and they weren't hers. Emma slowed down and studied them. The prints were deep, like the person had been heavy or running fast. She bent down and looked at the shape. No shoes, no socks, just bare feet, long toes, wide soles. A chill went down her spine. Who would be walking barefoot in a forest this early, in this cold? She looked around again, suddenly aware that she couldn't hear anything, not even her own footsteps. It felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. Emma straightened up slowly and began walking, then jogging, again. But now she wasn't just exercising. She was nervous. She was being followed. As she kept jogging, the feeling of being followed grew stronger. Every time she passed between two trees, she imagined someone hiding behind one. Her pace picked up, and so did her heartbeat. She glanced over her shoulder constantly now. The fog wrapped around her like a blanket, and visibility dropped to just a few feet ahead. The trees seemed taller, the shadows darker, and every sound felt like it came from too close. Then she heard it, a low grunt, not loud, not angry, just strange, like someone breathing heavily, trying to stay quiet. Emma stopped running. Her breaths came in short gasps now, and her hands were shaking. She slowly turned around, scanning the fog behind her. Nothing, just the path, trees, and more mist. "Hello?" she called out, her voice small and unsure. No answer. But then she heard it again. Breathing. Closer this time. A raspy, uneven sound, like someone trying to stay silent while gasping for air. She backed away from the sound, her shoes crunching on the wet gravel. The sound stopped. Emma took off her other earbud and stuffed it in her pocket. She listened hard, holding her breath. Suddenly, a branch snapped to her left. She turned sharply, still nothing visible. Her skin broke out in goosebumps. That's when she made a choice. She was getting out of that forest. No more curiosity. No more jogging. She turned and started running back, faster than before. But after just a few steps, she heard new footsteps. Loud, fast, and definitely not her own. She looked back and saw him. A tall, pale man with wide, staring eyes. He had no shirt on, his skin grayish-white, and he was barefoot. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't laughing. He was just running straight toward her, arms pumping, his mouth slightly open. Panic took over. Emma ran as fast as her legs could carry her. Her chest burned, and her throat felt like it was closing. She could hear his footsteps pounding the ground behind her, getting louder. She didn't look back again. She couldn't. She focused on the path, on the way the trees began to thin ahead. She was getting close to the forest's edge, to safety. But the footsteps stayed right behind her. At one point, she felt something tug her ponytail, like a hand swiped at it and just missed. She screamed and pushed harder, tears in her eyes. She finally burst out of the forest and onto the empty road near her neighborhood. Her lungs burned like fire and her legs nearly gave out. She spun around, expecting him to burst out after her. But the woods were empty again. No man, no sound, just the quiet road and the morning light beginning to rise over the trees. Emma stood there for a long minute, waiting, watching. But no one came out. It was like he had vanished into the fog. Shaking, she walked quickly home, constantly checking behind her. Every bush, every tree made her jump. She locked the door behind her and fell to the floor, trying to catch her breath. Her hands were trembling so badly she could barely hold her phone. She called the police and told them what happened. Officers came and walked the forest trail with her. They found the footprints. They found broken branches and disturbed leaves. But no man, no sign of him. One of the officers even said it could have been a homeless person or someone mentally unstable. Emma knew better. This was not normal. Something was wrong with that man. For the next few days, Emma didn't jog. She barely slept. She kept thinking about those eyes, blank and wide, staring through her. She kept her curtains closed, and every noise outside made her jump. Her phone rang once in the middle of the night, but no one was there when she picked up. Sometimes she thought she heard breathing outside her window, but whenever she looked, there was no one there. Her friends told her to relax, to maybe take a break from jogging. She agreed. The forest didn't feel safe anymore. It didn't even feel real. Then, one morning, something happened that made her move out of that town completely. She opened her front door to get the mail and froze. There, on her porch, were muddy footprints, barefoot, large, the same size. They led from the edge of her lawn right up to her door. No other marks, no broken fence, nothing. Just those footprints. Emma backed into her house and slammed the door shut. She never jogged in that forest again. She never even walked outside alone again. And to this day, she still wonders who or what was chasing her that morning. Mark was a quiet person who liked to keep to himself. He lived alone in a small apartment near the edge of the city, where the noise of traffic didn't reach and the nights stayed peaceful. He worked long hours at a nearby factory and often didn't get home until after 8 p.m. Jogging had become a way to clear his mind and deal with stress. He wasn't much of a daytime runner. He preferred the stillness of night. There was a public park only 2 blocks away, and it had a running track with street lamps surrounding it. It felt safe, familiar. He had been using that track for over a year. Every night around 10 p.m., Mark would put on his hoodie, plug in his earphones, and jog a few laps. He rarely saw anyone else there, maybe a dog walker or a late-night stroller once in a while, but mostly he was alone. That was part of the charm. The cold air at night felt refreshing, and the city lights in the distance always gave him comfort. The park itself was small but well kept, with a few benches, some trees, and the track circling a dry fountain. On one chilly November night, Mark followed his usual routine. Hoodie, earphones, water bottle. He locked his door and started walking to the track under a sky full of stars. When he got there, he did some stretches and started jogging slowly. The lamps around the track flickered slightly, but they often did that. Nothing unusual. His first lap went by quickly, the cold air stinging his lungs a bit but waking him up. By the second lap, he was in his rhythm, feet hitting the pavement, music thumping in his ears. That's when he noticed something. A shape, dark, motionless, standing. At the far end of the track, just beyond the pool of light from the last lamp. Mark squinted but kept running. Maybe it was a trash can, he thought, or a shadow cast by the trees. But as he got closer, he realized it was tall, human-shaped. He slowed down, trying to get a better look. But as he approached, the figure stepped, backward into the darkness, out of view. Mark stopped jogging and pulled out one earbud. He stared into the dark trees. "Hey!" he called out, unsure why he felt nervous. No answer. Just the faint hum of the lamps and his own breathing. He waited for a minute, then shook his head and kept running, trying to ignore the chill crawling up his spine. But with every step, that uncomfortable feeling stayed. Something had changed. The park didn't feel like home anymore. On the third lap, he kept looking toward the spot where the figure had stood. But it was empty now. That should have made him feel better, but it didn't. In fact, his uneasiness grew worse. He couldn't hear footsteps behind him, but it felt like someone was pacing him, just outside the circle of light. His instincts screamed at him to leave, but his brain kept telling him he was being paranoid. Still, he pulled out both earbuds and slowed to a walk. The night was quieter than usual. No insects, no cars. Just a strange, buzzing silence that filled the air like static. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw movement again. This time, the figure was on the opposite side of the track, closer, standing near one of the benches. Mark stopped dead in his tracks. The figure was taller than he had thought, over 6 feet, completely black, no features, just a dark shape. It didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, like it had been waiting for him. Mark's mouth went dry. "Hey, are you okay?" he called, taking a cautious step forward. The figure tilted its head slightly, not like a person, more like an animal hearing a strange sound. Without warning, the lights above the track flickered again. But this time, they all blinked out for a second. Total darkness. When they came back on, the figure was gone. Mark felt his stomach drop. He turned in a slow circle, scanning every corner of the park. It was empty. The bench, the path, even the shadows between the trees. Nothing. He rubbed his arms, suddenly freezing. Every instinct screamed at him to leave. He turned toward the exit, heart pounding, but stopped when he heard it. His name, whispered from behind him. "Mark!" It was quiet but clear. Someone, or something, knew his name. He didn't wait any longer. Mark broke into a full sprint, running straight for the park gate. His footsteps echoed in the empty night, each one louder than the last. He didn't look back. He didn't want to know if something was following. As he passed the last lamppost, it flickered and went out. Mark finally made it out of the park, gasping for breath, and looked back. Nothing. Just the dim glow of the lamps and the cold stillness. But he knew. He had been watched, and he had been called. When Mark got home, he slammed the door shut and locked it behind him. He stood in the dark for a while, just listening. His apartment was silent, but his mind wasn't. That shadow, how had it moved so fast? How did it know his name? He had never believed in ghosts or supernatural things before, but this felt different. This felt real. He sat on his couch for hours, too shaken to sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that figure, motionless, faceless, watching. At 3:01 a.m., he finally stood up to get a glass of water. As he walked past his living room window, something made him stop. He looked outside and froze. Across the street, under the flickering street lamp, stood the same shadowy figure, still, unmoving, watching. Mark's breath caught in his throat. The figure didn't move, didn't react. It was like a statue, except he could feel it looking at him. He stepped back slowly and pulled the curtain closed, his hands shaking. It didn't make sense. It shouldn't be there. He lived on the third floor. There was no way it could have followed him without being seen. The next morning, Mark didn't go to work. He barely slept. He sat by the window all day watching the street, but the figure didn't come back. The night after that, he didn't go jogging. He told himself it was just stress, just his imagination. But deep down, he knew it wasn't. The next night, he tried to go back to the park during the day. Nothing felt strange then. No shadows, no whispering. But he still felt like something had followed him home, like a part of that shadow had attached itself to him. He started seeing it more often, in reflections, at the corner of his eye, in the alleyway behind his building, always watching, always. Quiet. He would hear his name in dreams, see that head tilt when he closed his eyes. Friends began noticing he was pale, tired, and scared all the time. But how could he explain something he couldn't prove? One day, he packed a bag and left the city. No goodbye notes, no final message. He just disappeared. Some say they still see a shadow at that park. Others say if you jog alone after midnight, you'll hear your name, and once you hear it, the shadow never forgets you. Rachel had recently moved to a small countryside town called Willow Creek after her job transferred her out of the city. She was a graphic designer and worked from home now, which gave her lots of free time. The peaceful environment was a nice change from the fast-paced city life, and she liked the quiet. Her house was surrounded by fields and a thick forest that bordered the back of her property. Locals said the woods were centuries old, untouched and deep. Rachel, being from the city, didn't give it much thought. In fact, she found them beautiful. Every evening before dinner, she'd go for a jog along a path that curved into the edge of the forest and looped back to the road. She didn't go deep, just enough to feel the cool shade of the trees and hear the rustle of leaves underfoot. The trail was old but still used, with clear signs of others walking or biking. Sometimes she'd spot rabbits or deer jumping through the trees. At first it felt magical, like something out of a storybook. But after 2 weeks of evening jogs, something began to change. Small things. Birds that stopped chirping the moment she stepped on the trail. The feeling that someone was walking behind her, matching her steps. And sometimes, when she stopped running, the footsteps would continue. For just a second longer. Rachel told herself it was just her imagination, leftover anxiety from city living. Still, she started jogging with her phone in hand and music off, just in case. She never saw anyone on the trail, which was strange in itself. She tried to mention it to her neighbor, an old woman named Mrs. Levin, but the conversation turned cold the moment she brought up the forest. "Don't go in too deep," Mrs. Levin had warned, her voice low and serious. "Bad things hide in those woods. They don't like being disturbed." Rachel chuckled nervously and nodded, but the old woman didn't smile. She just stared at Rachel like she already knew something. Despite the warning, Rachel didn't stop. Jogging. She liked the routine, the escape, but one evening she left a bit later than usual. The sun had nearly set, and the shadows under the trees stretched long and dark. She hesitated at the entrance to the trail but shook off her nerves and started running. The trees creaked in the breeze, and the path crunched beneath her shoes. Halfway through the loop, she heard it again, footsteps behind her. She stopped and turned around. No one. But this time the sound didn't stop. It kept going for another few seconds. Then silence. Rachel's skin prickled. She turned and ran faster than she ever had before, not daring to look back. Rachel burst out of the woods and onto the road, panting and wild-eyed. Her chest was tight, and her hands were shaking. She glanced over her shoulder, but the path was empty. Nothing had followed her. No shadowy figure. No wild animal. Just the silent, dark entrance to the forest. She stood there for a while, her body tense, waiting for something to emerge. But it didn't. After a few minutes, she forced herself to walk home. She didn't sleep well that night. Every sound made her jump. The wind against the window, the creak of the wooden floor, the distant hoot of an owl. She kept the hallway, light on, something she hadn't done since childhood. The next day she tried to laugh it off. Maybe she had just scared herself. Maybe the footsteps had been echoes, or a deer running parallel to her. That evening, she promised herself she wouldn't jog. But after dinner, she felt restless. The trail was part of her daily habit now, and avoiding it made her feel like she was giving in to fear. So as the sky turned orange, she laced up her shoes and headed out, this time with a flashlight in her hand and her phone ready to call someone. The trail looked normal in the fading light, peaceful even, but she didn't go in far, just a short loop. She kept her breathing steady and ears open. About 10 minutes in, Rachel slowed down to take a breath. The woods around her were still, too still. No birds, no wind, no animal sounds. Then she saw it. A figure standing deeper in the trees, partially hidden behind a thick trunk. It was tall, thin, and facing her. She couldn't see a face, just the outline of a person, perfectly still. Her stomach dropped. "Hello?" she called, her voice tight. The figure didn't move, didn't even twitch. She stepped back slowly. Her flashlight flickered once. She aimed it at the figure, but when the beam hit the tree, nothing. No one there, just empty bark. Her heart pounded. She turned and ran again. This time as she ran, she could hear breathing, not hers. It was low, wheezing, coming from behind, her keeping pace. She didn't dare stop or look back. The trail seemed longer now, like it was stretching. The trees looked different, older, twisted. When she finally made it to the road again, she felt like she had escaped a trap. She turned around, and there it was again. The figure, standing at the trail entrance, watching. It didn't follow her. It just stood. She backed away, never turning her back to it until she was on her porch. That night she locked every door, closed every curtain, and kept the lights on. But even then, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed her home. Over the next few days, Rachel stayed away from the forest. But strange things began happening. At first it was the dreams. Vivid, dark dreams of running through the woods, chased by something she couldn't see. Then she started finding mud on her porch steps in the morning, handprints smeared on her back windows. One morning she found her back door slightly open, even though she knew she had locked it. She called the police, but they found no signs of a break-in. "Probably a raccoon," the officer said, but Rachel knew better. Raccoons don't breathe heavily behind you in the woods. Raccoons don't stand and watch without blinking. One night she stayed up late editing a client's design. Around 2 a.m., she got up to get some water and passed by the window that overlooked the backyard. She froze. Just past the tree line, standing in the exact center of the trail's entrance, was the same tall figure. She could barely see it in the dark, but it was there. She didn't turn on the light. She didn't want it to know she had seen it. She backed away slowly, phone in hand. But before she could dial, she heard something new. Whispers. Soft, strange whispers coming from every corner of the room. They weren't in English. They weren't in any language she recognized. The whispering stopped the moment she turned on the kitchen light. The figure was gone. But Rachel knew now it wasn't just in the forest. It had followed her. It had chosen her. She tried to leave Willow Creek the next morning, but her car wouldn't start. The mechanic said there was nothing wrong. "Sometimes things just stop," he said with a shrug. She began sleeping during the day and staying up all night, watching the windows. But the figure always came when the sun went down. It never came close. It just watched, waiting. One morning, her neighbor, Mrs. Levin, knocked on her door. She looked worried. "It's with you now," she said without any explanation. "You stayed too long on that path." Rachel tried to ask what she meant, but Mrs. Levin only said, "You can't run from it. You brought it here. and it will keep walking until your last jog. That night, Rachel was seen running again, not on the path, but in her own backyard, in circles, crying and gasping for air. And then she disappeared. No one found her. Only a single trail of muddy footprints that led into the woods and stopped at the base of a twisted tree.